I wish I was farting. I'm not farting or burping. This is a disaster.
We're rolling. Are you rolling?
My name's Ross, and welcome to Crazy Couch, where I attempt to reimagine video games to create new experiences. In 1962, three computer scientists at MIT, inspired by sci-fi novels and interactive computer technology such as the game Tennis for Two, created Space War, a two-player combat video game that lit a fire under the industry, despite primitive technology. Its influence was felt heavily in the saturation of space games and arcades during the 1970s. The following decades brought innovations, finding a home for games on personal computers and family television sets. But even as these advancements birthed a plethora of genres and styles, programmers continued to tell their stories among the stars. From adventure to horror, the scope and content of space and video games is constantly expanding and feeding our hunger for exploration. Personally, whether I was replaying the Battlefront Galactic Conquest game mode with my friends in a den of Funyun farts, or watching through my hands as my brother killed necromorphs in Dead Space, I grew up on space video games. One night during the fall of 10th grade, I was at my friend Jesse's house playing sports games and pretending that I was cool enough to enjoy them when he showed me the trailer for a game called No Man's Sky. I usually don't remember video game trailers, but for some reason this one stuck with me. If you're unfamiliar with No Man's Sky, it's created by Sean Murray and his team at Hello Games. You play a space explorer who's just recently crash-landed on a planet on the edge of a galaxy, and your goal is to collect resources using a multi-tool and repair your ship and eventually depart the planet. The goal is to visit other planets, collect resources, and eventually reach the center of the galaxy. But here's the kicker. The entire universe is procedurally generated, meaning that the game uses mathematical algorithms to create about 18 quintillion full-sized planets, all of which you can explore. By August 2016, I held my own copy in my hands. Ecstatic, I popped it in the PS4 and played for about 10 hours. Total. If you're not a math whiz like me, that's not enough time to visit 18 quintillion planets. It's not that I didn't have fun. The planets were beautiful, the crafting was interesting, and the survival was challenging. The problem wasn't in the size of the game, but in the repetition. Mine resources, visit other planets, mine more resources, make fuel, visit more planets, make purple fuel. But I wasn't alone in my disappointment. Fans' reactions were rightfully negative as the launch lacked promised features like, I don't know, multiplayer. Since then, over 4 years, Hello Games has added features to fix the game, such as the promised multiplayer and a base building system. But wait, I'm not here just to talk about a space video game. Rewind to 2004, AAA giant Ubisoft just released a game called Far Cry. You might have heard of it. This action-adventure first-person shooter featured a distinct wilderness warfare style that would spawn a franchise. Spanning various environments from the plains of Africa to a remote Pacific island, the games were not linked through narrative, but through consistent gameplay. At the same time, its inattention to narrative has been a weakness for Far Cry. After 7 games and several DLC, Ubisoft's formula has become stagnant, leaving us with boring protagonists, predictable storylines, and about 100 kidnapping cutscenes. While the Far Cry games and No Man's Sky are fantastic in their own ways, they have their weaknesses. But what if I told you that the solution was right under our noses this entire time? What if I told you that you could use the procedural generation in No Man's Sky to shake up the Far Cry story? What if I told you that by gathering data on 18 quintillion planets in No Man's Sky and correlating them with literary features used in screenwriting, you could turn No Man's Sky's procedurally generated universe into a Far Cry script calculator? Oh wait, I already did that. I already spent 40 hours doing that. Yay! Have you ever played a Far Cry game and thought, I sure am killing a lot of endangered tigers with rocket-propelled grenades, but what if the story was good? I know I have. But with my formula, you'll soon have the tools you need to write your very own interesting Far Cry game. The goal of this project is to use the procedurally generated features in No Man's Sky's planets and translate them to a pattern of literary devices that we could use to turn the universe into a randomized script template generator that we could use to write Far Cry narratives. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ross, this sounds like a TED Talk for people going to hell. Well, it is. Located on the World Wide Web, right between nasa.gov and coolmathgamesforkids.com, No Man's Sky's Discovered Planet database contains over 3,000 entries, with loads of data I could use. But I chose to focus on the 6 main features of the planets: biome, resources, sentinel behavior, weather patterns, and fauna and flora density. A lot of the entries in the database didn't have one or two of the features I needed, so sadly I couldn't use some of the player-named planets, such as Cowboy World, but I really wanted to. Next, I settled on 6 literary features to correspond with these planetary elements that will form the backbone of our script templates. These include, respectively, setting, style, conflict, theme, and protagonist traits and quirks. But here was the tricky part. For every possible planetary input, I needed to write a literary output so that each Far Cry script would be different. For example, let's say a planet's biome is a tundra. What Far Cry setting would that translate to? What Far Cry conflict would come from a planet with a high sentinel level of aggression, etc.? So for every potential variation of the planetary inputs, I wrote a different literary output device. Planet biomes in No Man's Sky fall into 8 different categories and will correspond with these settings. Some biomes, such as freezing, correspond with tangible settings, such as Siberia, whereas others correspond with events, such as a zombie survival setting. I know that's not really the point of a setting, but you're not my dad. There are 6 common resource types in the planets on No Man's Sky, each corresponding with a different literary style. Think of these like subgenres to mix up Far Cry's action-adventure template. For example, a planet heavy in isotopes would be written in a Gothic style, whereas a planet with a lot of exotic resources would be written as high fantasy. Who wouldn't want to play Skyrim with guns? I would love to play Skyrim with guns. Yes, please, John Ubisoft, thank you. Sentinels are the robot cops on every planet in No Man's Sky who punish players for overmining resources. Sentinel activity gauges the level of aggression of each planet's robotic police force. There are 28 individual levels of aggressiveness in the database, most of which are synonyms. For every level of Sentinel aggression, I wrote a story prompt to engage our Far Cry script with some conflict. These range from you require an antidote to save your ill spouse to you sleepwalk onto the estate of a rich eccentric. For some reason, there are hundreds of discrete weather types in No Man's Sky, but acidic deluge and corrosive damp are the same thing, so I lumped them into 19 general weather patterns, each corresponding with a literary theme to plug into our Far Cry narrative. For example, incendiary weather patterns correspond to themes of forbidden love, while stormy weather corresponds to themes of parenthood. There are 39 different density levels of fauna and flora in planets in No Man's Sky that make up 4 general categories: high, medium, low, and no density. I paired fauna, aka wildlife, with the protagonist of our Far Cry story's main characteristic, such as loyal or imaginative. On the other hand, I paired flora, aka plant density, with the protagonist's quirk, such as skilled dancer or prone to sing quietly. Will these enhance our Far Cry narrative? I don't know. Would Jason Brody have been a more interesting protagonist if he was an expert rock skipper? He actually was an expert rock skipper. That was like the whole stealth mechanic of the Far Cry games. You might be wondering how I came up with 39 different characteristics and quirks for these protagonists. I mostly referred to tables in Dungeons & Dragons manuals. Our protagonists' characteristics and quirks will become progressively worse as the flora and fauna on the planets decreases. And if we discover a planet with no fauna or flora, our character will have no defining characteristics, just like a real Far Cry game. If you multiply all these potential outputs, this formula can spawn 38,840,256 different templates. And while I have spent an embarrassing number of hours on this project, I don't have enough time on this Earth to log 18 quintillion planets, nor am I smart enough to make a program to do it for me. So I logged 100 iterations of this formula, and now it's time to show my work. Here's my data on a spreadsheet. Now before you tell me, Ross, this is a nightmare to look at, I know it's a nightmare. I made it. I'm about to show you why it's a nightmare. Every row represents a different planet, and the columns list the planetary elements as they correspond with the literary devices separated by a /. Now, there are 100 rows, each representing a different Far Cry script template, all of them good, but I only did 100 iterations. Remember, you could do this with any planet in No Man's Sky, creating quintillions of iterations. I should be in jail. So we have our data. Let's look and see how our formula can convert a No Man's Sky planet to a Far Cry script using an example, planet 29, Asher. Asher features a toxic biome with poisonous weather, meaning that we're playing in a zombie apocalyptic setting with themes of totalitarianism. Silicates are the main resource on this planet, meaning that it's going to be written in a classic Western style, and I accidentally created The Walking Dead. According to Asher's flora-fauna density, our character is going to be a bashful master of disguise, and we are thrown into a conflict when a child asks us to discover the true meaning of Christmas. Now, I know on first glance it doesn't scream Far Cry, but this template has given us a lot of space to play in. You've got your Christmas theme, who's going to be the totalitarian dictator, probably Krampus, who's going to be the evil regime, probably elves. You could climb candy canes instead of radio towers. You could enslave zombie reindeer instead of horses, whatever. I can tell you one thing, this is gonna be a far cry from a bad game. Thank you, man. Now that we've seen our formula in action, let's see what else this bad boy can do. Planet number 5, Taborbao. This is a moon-based Far Cry game with a paranormal style and strong themes of nostalgia, in which a mischievous child has given your protagonist incorrect coordinates to a buried treasure, and your protagonist does not have any prevalent characteristics or quirks whatsoever. Given the paranormal style, I'm assuming that the child is actually a ghost, and in this Far Cry game, you're not going to be fighting an evil regime, but rather an army of ghost children on the moon. Given that you're on the moon and you have nobody for company except ghost teens, it sounds pretty scary, and I don't like it. Okay, some of these are actually cool, like number 21, Faeza. They didn't kill it with procedurally generated names. In this Far Cry game, you play a female chieftain in a Gothic Siberian village who never misses the big game. But your whole world is turned upside down when a wizard steals your true name, and you must solve his riddles to get it back. That's powerful, and while we've seen a primitive combat style in Far Cry Primal, we haven't seen sword and sorcery yet. Another example is number 49, Morp Ka Prumid. That sucks. In this sci-fi adventure, you play a protagonist that is both impish and disagreeable. That's a bad combination for a protagonist. And in this setting, you are called to the future to save the planet from zombies. The great and terrible thing about this formula is I've accidentally thrown in a lot of different plots at once. You've got time travel, you've got futuristic combat, and you've got zombies, and you got a lot to work with, Ubisoft. But for the same reason, some of the templates just, they don't work. Planet 82, Kasuk Nikon. Jesus. This is set in, okay, this one's on me. I chose to set these scorched biomes in historic Pompeii just before the volcanic eruption, which it limits the story a little bit. It's got a Wild West setting. That wasn't Pompeii. The conflict involves you're a dad and you are following your son into an amusement park at nighttime to find him. They didn't have those in Pompeii. And the prevalent theme of this story is romantic love. I could see how you'd have a hard time pitching this to Ubisoft. Planet 44, Xerox 11. This one also doesn't work because it involves you sleepwalking onto the estate of a rich person, but it's also in Siberia, and you can't sleepwalk in Siberia or you die. Now you might have noticed, about 28 of these iterations feature protagonists with no defining characteristic or quirk. So, there's that. Planet 74, Hekrati, finally a name I can pronounce, is set in a high fantasy nuclear wasteland in which you play a prideful hero whose oldest bully has just been granted 3 wishes by a genie. Essentially, the last third of Aladdin, but Fallout. Getting through them. Planet 92, Atorkisomis.
Ross, why do you do this?
Because I hate myself. This is set in a Gothic Arabian town in which a psychic toddler has wandered into the village and challenges you to an arm wrestling competition. Idea, what if every character in this game was a child and we get Far Cry for kids? This planet's just called Charizard. I just wanted you to know that. Let's look at planet number 22, Cubutian. In this story, the protagonist is a haughty character who is very good to their grandmother. This is a mystery set in Yosemite Valley with themes of environmentalism. I'm looking at Yosemite Valley, I'm looking at environmentalism, I'm looking at the haughty protagonist. I think you are the Lorax. My director just told me to be funnier, so Have y'all seen Sonic? Y'all seen the new Sonic movie? I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting all my jokes that I wrote for this video in, and I've got this one note in my folder. It's got one section called jokes, and it just says, oof boof, my name's Sean Murray and I made a lot of planets. So, came a long way. Should I just look up a space joke? Dirty space jokes? Give me some of them dirty space jokes. This joke was written incorrectly. Question, what was the first animal in space? Answer, the cow jumped over the moon. You did it wrong, you f***ed up. Yeah, these aren't dirty and horny and... I need this video to be hornier.
That's not horny at all.
I need more horny space jokes.
I found one that's just a button that says, I got a peek at Uranus.
Hot. Y'all ready for this one? Y'all ready for Zutan Halfukawa?
Okay, hell yeah, I'm ready.
It's a ghost story in which you, a considerate master of disguise, have been suspended inside of a video game set in Yosemite National Park, and the only way to get out is to beat the game. And there's themes of romantic love. But Ross, how are you gonna make that into a Far Cry game? I'm glad you asked. Here's the plot. You wake up in a hunting cabin, walk into the forest, you hit a glass wall, uh-oh, you're actually inside the Big Buck Hunter 2 at your local gaddy town. You can see your spouse through the glass and she's flirting with one of the guys that brings out the bottomless pizza. The ghost of an old pioneer finds you in your hunting cabin and tells you that to escape, you have to hunt the most dangerous game of all. Deer. So you beat Big Buck Hunter 2, and right when you think that your score is high enough, you realize that you actually have to travel to other video games in the gaddy town and beat the protagonist of each title until you fight the main villain himself, Chuck E. Cheese. And bada bing, bada boom, you got a Far Cry game on your hands, buddy. Okay. I'll be the first to recognize the flaws with my system. Not all of these iterations work. Some of them just sound like Insane Clown Posse music videos. I also may have overlooked some crucial relationships between the biomes and primary resources in the planets of No Man's Sky, leading to a lot of lunar ghost stories. But that's life. I don't really know how to end a video this insane, but thank you, Hello Games, for surviving for 4 years and continually trying to improve a game that was, from the start, beautifully conceptualized. And thank you, Ubisoft, for creating the extremely fun world of Far Cry. This video is part of a series called Crazy Couch, where, like I have done today, I try to reimagine video games to create new experiences. So if you want to see me pour more dozens of hours into this, please subscribe to the channel. I will be making more of these for some reason. Please leave a like on this if you enjoyed it, and comment which iterations were your favorite, which ones did you hate. Did I create Frankenstein's monster on accident? So thank you for watching. I will see you next time.